Yeah, I think it's a good film to connect to yesterday's talk. If if you were here yesterday, and today, because yesterday if we focus on Negros, the Philippine experience, now today is we will travel um, to several contexts in Southeast Asia, stories, um, because I think ideas travel and being transported and transformed, and the Philippines in this case exported one good idea 40 years ago through the existence of PETA, is People, Education and Theater. I forgot the last name. Yeah, arts. And then so in this fourth session, I'm going to invite two friends from Southeast Asia, one from Singapore and one from Indonesia. And from Jejak-Tabi, to be precise, is a city in Central Java. And they will share a kind of like historical review how PETA inspired certain theater practices in the 80s and 90s, and even some traces and influences that carry on until today. And so I would like to invite Alfian Saad and Muhammad Abe to come to the stage. Yeah, so it will start with Alfian with a specific stories, case studies within Singapore context in relation to PETA. Please, Alfian.
Thank you. Okay, good morning everyone. Just a brief introduction of myself. My name is Alfian Saad. I'm actually a playwright from Singapore with a theatre company that is called Wild Rise. So I would like to thank Jejak-Tabi for this invitation, and of course your kind college for hosting us today. Okay, so my presentation today will look at the influence or the transmission of certain ideas from the group known as PETA, Philippine Educational Theatre Association. So without further ado, let's take a look at my many slides. So it's called Unfinished Movements, PETA, the Third Stage, and A People's Theatre. So to begin my presentation, I would like to take all of you back to the year 1987. This is the headline of the newspapers in Singapore in that year. It says Marxist plot uncovered, yeah, and on that day, it was reported that 14 people were arrested on the 21st of May, 1987, and then later on, about a month later, there were 6 people arrested on 20th of June, 1987. So I bring your attention to this because it's relevant to our presentation today. So this thing was called the Marxist conspiracy. The official name for it was Operation Spectrum. 22 Singaporeans were arrested and detained without trial under the Internal Security Act for their alleged involvement in a Marxist conspiracy to subvert the existing social and political system in Singapore using Communist United Front tactics with a view to establishing a Marxist state. So this was the charge or accusation from the state. 4 of them, Wong Suk Yi, Cheng Suan Zi, William Yap, and Tay Hong Sing, were key members of a theatre company which is called the Third Stage. So let's see, what is the Third Stage? So the Third Stage was a theatre company in Singapore that was founded in the year 1983. This is the brochure for the first performance, which was a double bill called Things We Paid For and No Foul Play. So the Third Stage, as I mentioned, was founded in 1983. It was registered as a society in which you need a minimum of 10 members and a constitution. The objectives of the Third Stage, as has been mentioned in the brochure, is to promote interest in theatrical activities among Singaporeans, to develop works based on local content, and to introduce the use of drama as a form of community activity. So how did they come to name this theatre company the Third Stage? So according to them, the first stage of English drama consisted of British plays performed by British companies during colonial times. So as you would know, Singapore was a British colony. The second stage consisted of English language plays adapted into a Singaporean context. And then the third stage consisted of plays that promote local culture by creating works based on the local context. So this idea of the third stage is actually quite close to Frantz Fanon's idea, or the narrative of 3 stages of decolonization, yeah, which is assimilation, and then rejection, and finally revolution. So although they don't mention this explicitly in any of their publicity materials, one can make this connection. And of course, the title, The Third Stage, also has echoes of the Third World, as well as the Third Cinema, which is a movement by Solanas and Gettino, where they say that the first cinema is Hollywood, second cinema is European art house cinema, and third cinema is all other kinds of cinema that has been peripheralized by the global cinematic system. Okay, so what are the origins and influences of the third stage, yeah? So the founder member, Wong Suk Yi, attended the Asian Theatre Forum that was organized by PETA in 1982. And later on, she attended acting and directing workshops conducted by Singapore theatre practitioner Ko Pao Kun at the Practice Performing Arts School in 1983. So Pao Kun is important because he's one of the pioneers of Singapore theatre, both Mandarin and English theatre. And he also was arrested in the year 1976 for alleged communist or leftist leanings, and only released in 1980. So, last point there, after graduating from the workshops, some participants decided to set up a theatre company, aka the third stage. So now we move on to talk a little bit what is PETA. PETA is the Philippine Educational Theatre Association, and it was founded in 1967 by Cecil. Sorry, what? Sorry, I didn't hear that. Thank you very much. Cecil Guidita Alvarez, yes, I missed out that final name because I got this information from a book in which it was Guidote first. But you're right, it should be, the full one is Cecil Guidote Alvarez. Thank you for that correction. Thank you. Okay, so this is a very brief history of PETA, which I got from the book. In 1967, PETA was founded. Cecil Guidote Alvarez is the first executive director. In 1967 also, so PETA had these 2 branches. One was the Kalinangan Ensemble, which is actually the repertory theatre. And then you have SITAP, which is the Central Institute for Theatre Arts in the Philippines. And this had a more sort of a pedagogical arm and was looking more at like community theatre. In 1971, they organized the first Third World Theatre Festival. 1972, the Cultural Institute for Theatre Arts in Southeast Asia was formed. So rather than just restricting it to the Philippines, they wanted to expand it to Southeast Asia. In 1972, in the Philippines, this was the declaration of martial law under the Marcos government. And in 1973, Cecil Guidote Alvarez's exile in the United States, yeah? Because it was believed that she fell out with the Marcoses, and she feared for her safety, so she moved to the United States. Okay, so continuing from there, in 1973, Lino Broca becomes the new executive director of PETA. And in 1979, they had collaborations with Black Ten Theatre, which is a Japanese theatre company, also interested in community work. So they're called Black Ten Theatre because they have a truck and they have a tent, which is black. And then they would go to these communities like campuses, etc., and set up their tent and then start doing their plays, yeah, in public spaces. So in 1981, there's this thing called Lino's Bomb. I suppose like a bombshell. I look at it later. It's nothing terrorist related or involving an actual bomb. This is metaphorical. In 1982, there was a second Asian Theatre Forum. And finally, in 1986, the People's Power Revolution in the Philippines. So I stopped here. Of course, the history of PETA continues after 1986, but for the purposes of my presentation, this is the kind of periodization or bracketing that I'm concerned with. Okay, so some images regarding PETA. In the middle, we'll see the original PETA logo, the buffalo, and then you see the wording PETA up there. You see Lino Broca as well, second executive director. The first one, Cecily Guidote Alvarez. On the bottom left is a play, Larawan by Nick Joaquin. I think this is based on a novel, the portrait of the artist as a Filipino. Yeah? Are there PETA people here today? You seem to know this history very well. Yes, so if I make little mistakes or whatever, please call me out. I will listen. Okay, and finally you have an image of the Black Tent Theatre in the bottom right. Okay, so what is this thing called the Lino's bomb? So this particular phrase, I got it from the book as well. So Lino Broca, in 1981, he received a tip that the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces kept a list of supposed Marxist ideologues in PETA. And therefore he called for a General Assembly and denounced the ideologues for using the company. And this caused a deep rift between the aesthetic wing of the Kalinengan Ensemble and the political or more pedagogical wing at Sitasa. More political members then eventually formed their own breakaway group called the Pangkat Layang Organization, and eventually Broca became politicized himself and formed the Concerned Artists of the Philippines in 1983, protesting government censorship. Yeah. Okay, so let's take a look at this Asian Theatre Forum, which was attended by Wong Suk Yi, the founder member of Third Stage. So in 1981, there were 3 Singaporeans who attended, and the year after, there were 4 Singaporeans. What is the Asian Theatre Forum? So this one I got from what was said about the forum. So our colonial history has made it difficult for us to define ourselves, and the continuing pollution of our culture and life has made it imperative for us to study the situation from a wider perspective. PETA, through Sitasa, has made efforts to establish links with people in other parts of Asia having similar problems and confronted with common issues that affect the conditions of life. In its struggle for a more humane condition of life, PETA continues its efforts to establish rapport with other concerned Asians. Already, it has had a chance to interact and dialogue with the Black Tent Theatre of Japan on several levels. It is with this rationale that PETA Sitasa now initiates the Asian Theatre Forum, a forum where Asians can meet, exchange ideas, discuss issues of concern, reflect, analyze, and gather insights that will allow a concerted effort in establishing a better life for peoples through theatre. Yeah? So, December 1981. So in the Asian Theatre Forum, the first one that was attended by some Singaporeans, it was a 7-week course, 22 students, 3 Singaporeans, 3 Malaysians, 6 Indonesians, 4 Japanese, 1 Indian, and 5 Filipinos. And one of the Singaporeans was Vincent Cheng, a Catholic social worker. In that year, the Asian Theatre Forum, with all these participants from all over Asia, they had a showcase presentation called Ang Pahahanap, The Search, which revealed different conditions of farming, fishing, and working peoples of Asia as they struggled with different monsters exploiting their lives. So I suppose monsters like landowners and governments and capitalism, etc. In early 1982, some participants continued with workshops in India and Sri Lanka. So the next year, with the Asian Theatre Forum 1982, this was a 6-week course at St. Mary's College, Quezon City. This time there were 19 participants, 4 Singaporeans, 2 Malaysians, 3 Papua New Guineans, 3 Thai, 3 Japanese, and 4 Filipinos. And Wong Suk Yi, a Business Times freelance journalist, was recommended by her friend who had attended the previous year's workshop. So I don't mention this particular friend because in my research for this, there were some people who requested anonymity, yeah, and because of the sensitivities around the Marxist conspiracy. So finally, in 1983, Wong attended another Asian Theatre Forum, the 3rd one, this time hosted by Black Tent Theatre in Tokyo, and this was organized by these members of the Black Tent Theatre, Sato Makoto, Hota Masahiko, and Yamamoto Jen. Okay, so this is an interview that I did with Wong Suk Yi very recently, last month, to find out more about her experiences in the Asian Theatre Forum. So one thing she said was, my mentor was Gardi Labad, a composer. If he'd take us to a park, ask us to pick up any object, and describe our responses to it. It was mind-blowing. So it seemed as if these were more kind of artistic exercises, workshops. I didn't get a sense that it was about political pedagogy or activism just yet. Yeah? It was my first in-depth immersion into this kind of theatre program. I didn't know anything about art. They wanted us to show our Asian art forms, which were not adulterated by Western forms. As Singaporeans, we could only present contemporary sketches, unlike the Thais, who could show off their traditional dance. So this is something that I think a lot of Singaporeans feel a bit insecure about. What exactly are our traditional arts? Because it seems like Singapore is a very westernized society and also a very young nation. The workshops reinforced my idea that theatre should be about your own surroundings, your own context, not borrowed from overseas and just adapted. The people at PETA really wanted us to create our own material. Okay, so let's hear from the PETA side, and this is from some writings about Sitasa. This is Lutgardo Gardi Lebat. To test the validity and methodology of the PETA pedagogy of theatre work to Asian artists, cultural workers, and community and development workers, to learn from the skills and traditions of Asian partners so that Philippine cultural work can be more Asian and indigenized, not Western-based, to develop links and ties with Asian artists for the development of an Asian-based theatre aesthetic, and to initiate forms of regional cooperation and collaboration in the field of popular cultural work. So it really does seem like they weren't doing very prescriptive workshops. There was a sense that they wanted to partner with other Asian artists for knowledge co-creation rather than a kind of unilateral transfer of knowledge. So let's look at the history of the third stage, yeah? They have a very brief history because they probably were most active for over five years. In 1983, No Foul Play and the Things We Paid For, these were their debut productions. 1984, Apollonio Bayani Chua, who was from PETA, helps to direct two of their plays, which were, in 1985, Cry for a Cactus and Oh Singapore. In 1985 as well, the third stage, they conduct workshops at the Theatre for the Young Festival. In 85 as well, they began a 6-month directing course at Practice Performing Arts School. In 86, they moved into the office and studio at Telok Ayer Performing Arts Centre. In 86 also, they did 2 plays, Corabella and Baby. In 86, they organized a drama camp in CHIJ Hostel. In 1986, they preview Esperanza, which is one of their plays, and it's about domestic workers, at the Geylang Catholic Center for 30 Filipino domestic workers. So this was actually really unusual for people doing theatre at that time, because usually you buy tickets, etc. And the kinds of communities, audiences that you play to is usually more middle-class audience, yeah? And in 1986, Esperanza was presented at the Arts Festival Fringe. 1986, Oh Singapore, another of their plays, excerpts were restaged at Play in the Park. Oh Singapore 2 was staged in 1986. In 1987, they organized a second drama camp at CHIJ. And then in, sorry, this should be 1987, huh? Not 86. 1987, members were arrested under the Internal Security Act. And then also 1987, the lease was not renewed at Telok Ayer Performing Arts Centre. Okay, so this is just very briefly some photos from their productions over the years. I'm going to focus on 3 of their plays to give you a kind of picture about the kinds of works that they were producing. So one of them is Oh Singapore in the year 1985. It's a movement-based drama depicting episodes from modern Singaporean life. Okay. So this are some of the reviews that they got. Just to summarize this, by the way, if you want these slides, it's all online. You can go to the link bit.ly/unfinished movements, and the slides are all up there as a PDF file, yeah? So if you want to read in greater detail some of these reviews. So basically what it was saying is that, if I might just pick out something, in the middle, the structure of this play is particularly interesting, a continuous flow movement drama, according to Swansea, who has drawn on her experience of working with a Dula Tula, stage poetry, Filipino director in London, and on the experience of Suk-Yi in Japan, where a movement drama explores the dynamic range of the human body to represent objects in perpetual motion. Okay. So basically, just to summarize, they were receiving quite good notices from critics, yeah? I'll just read the one in the middle. It was all very light, mood of the moment stuff. Not great drama, but certainly good cabaret type entertainment. So even when they were saying not great drama, we have to also be aware that the landscape in Singapore at that point of time, there was very little English language theatre. Most of the theatre produced was mostly in Mandarin and Malay. Okay, so O Singapore, another review. I'll read the one right at the bottom. Third stage is a group to watch, especially if it grows up without losing its dreams or vitality. Okay, and also another review by David Birch, who is an academic of O Singapore. I'll read the one at the bottom. This group represents in many ways a young society that is more and more critical of the material identity which it has been unwittingly given. It is a group intent on determining its own cause, which if developed will create a theatre of young, committed, dedicated Singaporeans. Okay, so I'll move on to another work of theirs in the year 1985. This is called Corabella, and as you can see, it's an allegorical play addressing state matchmaking and eugenics. So what is this state matchmaking? In the year 1985, or maybe 84, during what is called a National Day rally, the then Prime Minister of Singapore, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, made this speech where basically he lamented the fact that many women graduates in Singapore are not getting married and they're not having babies. So according to him, because of this, Singapore's high IQ gene pool is going to shrink over time. So basically he's blaming women's entry into the workforce for them not taking on what he considers traditional women's roles, like having babies and being a housewife. So as part of this whole what was called the Great Marriage Debate, what resulted were these two policies, and one of them was called the Social Development Unit. So this was a matchmaking service introduced by the state that was going to matchmake university graduates, right? So there are elements of eugenics that you only want high intelligence people to reproduce the next generation. The other side of this is a sterilization campaign. So actually, if you are lowly educated, the government would give you incentives to go for sterilization. So you'll undergo this process of tubal ligation, you won't have babies. So the whole point is that you won't pass on your so-called low IQ genes to the next generation. Now, of course, this was a very, very controversial policy in Singapore. So, and this play critiqued that. So let's just look at the one in the middle. By now, the tale, of course, has taken on an all too familiar ring. We all know that a CDU utopia is a pretty imaginative euphemism for SDU. So this is what's called the Social Development Unit. And that exclusive is just another word for graduate. So as I mentioned, the SDU was this unit that tried to matchmake graduates. Yeah. So these are some of the comments from the critic, and there was a reader who responded on the right. So I read a little bit on the left. The tale is an all too recognizable one. In Corabella, third stage, which is known for its plays on topical local issues, had chosen to poke well-meaning fun at the Social Development Unit and single graduates. And the right side, it says, someone defended the play and says, I think third stage has shown that Singaporeans are capable of great subtlety and depth and of presenting these qualities in a creative, artistic, and entertaining way. I hope the review does not affect them or other drama enthusiasts badly. Okay, and this I think is one of the most important plays. This is called Esperanza. And it is a social realist play on the life of a Filipino domestic worker in Singapore. So Caroline Ngui in Esperanza, she says, while doing a preview for this play, I'll read the one in the middle. We try not to alienate people by putting up high-sounding theatre, so the group's plays have been serious yet entertaining. We don't want to be didactic. In Esperanza also, I'll read the one in the middle. The play, previewed yesterday at the Catholic Welfare Center in Geylang, is based on real experiences of Filipina maids who have had the misfortune to work for ignorant and unfeeling employers and have suffered. I read the far right one as well. Said Miss Leonisa Pepito, 30. It happened to me with my former ma'am, mistress. All the screaming and shouting in the play, not shooting, shouting, it is real. Okay, so these are some images from the play. You can see on the top left a video image. There's one for the newspaper as well. And you can also see a kind of breakdown on the number of foreign domestic workers in Singapore. By the year 1989, there was a tenfold jump, right? 50,000 from 5,000 initially in 1976. The play was also based on research compiled to a book called The Maid Tangle, which documented 500 cases of domestic worker abuse in Singapore. Okay, when these previews, when these articles came out, there were a few Singaporeans who were very triggered and very defensive and actually wrote back to the press. And these were some of the headlines. They said, too much has been said on the abuse of maids. Singaporeans cannot have changed that much. And what they mean was that Singaporeans in the past also had domestic workers, known as amas, and they were mostly Chinese. And then also, most of them enjoy their stay here and are well treated. Okay, so many Singaporeans were very defensive, couldn't take a criticism of how they were treating domestic workers. Anyway, because of that, the third stage responded. You can go and see this by yourself if you have the link. Okay, and then after the play was produced, they had a review, and what the newspaper did was interesting. They actually asked a domestic worker employer to write a review. So she wrote, the one on the left side, play may help bridge a yawning chasm. And then they actually got a domestic worker to write her review. And on the right side, the domestic worker wrote the one on the left side, what a maid says, right? Play may help bridge a yawning chasm. The employer says clash which made for good drama. So both of them had positive responses to the play. So what's the critical reception to this third stage over the years? So this is from the Straits Times, Kate James. There is then firm evidence that Wong Suk Yi could develop into an important force in Singapore theatre if given enough exposure and encouragement. Caroline Ngui of the Straits Times says, the language and accent are typically Singaporean, the communication earnest. If third stage keeps in this direction, it could become the only people-oriented English language theatre group here, unafraid to plunge into topical local issues. Okay, Roger Jenkins says, theatre works have terrific design talent. Ko Pao Kun is a skilled director, and third stage's strength is their original material. And finally, Caroline Ngui says, of the English language drama groups here, third stage comes closest to the grassroots and reaches out not so much to the more privileged, but to normal, everyday, working people who have to cope with normal, everyday frustrations. A rapidly ripening group catering to a working class audience. Okay. So just very briefly, what was happening in Singapore in the 1980s, 1981, the People's Action Party, monopoly was broken by the Workers' Party in by-elections. So until today, Singapore has been ruled by the same ruling party since 1965. But in 81, opposition managed to sneak in. In 1983, there was what I mentioned just now, the Great Marriage Debate. 1984, there was a general elections, and this time the opposition had more gains. They got 2 seats. 1985, it was the first recession in Singapore since independence, and then 1987, they had this thing called the Marxist conspiracy. So we go back to this headline in 1987. What was being said regarding the Marxist conspiracy and the third stage? Let's look at that. Third stage, an English language drama group, was set up in 1983 by 5 of the 16 people arrested to radicalize the public through cultural activities. Before third stage was formed, Wong, a senior research executive, attended a drama workshop in the Philippines for radical groups. The Home Affairs Ministry statement said, third stage has consistently produced satirical plays which presented Singapore's social and political system in a bad light. Okay. Cheng used theatre as weapon. Vincent Cheng also believed in the effectiveness of popular theatre as one of the entry points into the community. He had attended a workshop in Sri Lanka in 1982 on using people's theatre as a weapon in the people's struggle for liberation. And he arranged for Wong Suk Yi, a founder member of the third stage, to attend a drama workshop conducted in the Philippines for radical groups. So again, this kind of characterization that PETA is a radical indoctrination kind of company, yeah? And then another headline, the Filipino Connection. Al Santos, the member of the New People's Army, whom Cheng was in frequent contact with, visited Singapore many times to provide guidance to the activists involved in the drama group Third Stage. Cheng said he first met Santos in August 1981 when he came to Singapore to conduct a workshop on script writing and directing. Santos is a staff member of PETA, Philippines Educational Theatre Association, again, a radical drama group in Manila. So Al Santos managed to defend himself. He says, Filipino playwright Al Santos, named by the Home Affairs Ministry as a member of the Communist New People's Army, NPA, of the Philippines, has denied any communist links. In an open letter to the Prime Minister, also sent to the Straits Times, he said he was not an NPA member, but only an artist of the theatre with a special affinity for the Singapore drama group Third Stage. And in Manila, he told the Straits Times, "I am not a communist. I am not even ideological." Okay, so the Marxist Conspiracy, they produced this video where you had all these so-called confessions from the people that they arrested. And these are some images from that video. You can see that they were really trying very hard to establish that there was this clandestine network of people composed of social workers and artists and activists, and they were all out to overthrow the government. In some of the images, they showed some rallies and gatherings in the Philippines to basically provoke fear that, oh, this kind of unrest would have happened in Singapore if we had allowed the Third Stage to keep on doing their grassroots-oriented theatre. So Vincent Cheng, this was his interview. He says, "I had some formal lessons in classical Marxism, which I found quite abstract and boring. But getting involved later in cultural work, performing dramas, singing songs reflecting people's lives, helped me to understand that theatre is a very important vehicle to expose social realities to the masses." And this was Wong Suk Yi. "I attended this 6-week workshop in Manila in 1982. It was a very intensive workshop on learning the basic dramatic skills. From PETA, it sort of reinforced my own thinking of how drama can be used in Singapore to politicize the people and to get people to come together and act to bring out certain social changes. My idea of society is where people are equal, there's no class structure, and there's equal distribution of wealth and resources." So I'll just move quickly through his. Okay, so in the Marxist Conspiracy, all detainees except Vincent Cheng were finally released by the end of 1987. So a lot of them were detained for maybe around 4 months. On 18 April 1988, 9 former detainees released a press statement alleging threats, intimidation, and torture. They said, "We were compelled to appear on television and warned that our release would depend on our performances on TV. We were coerced to make statements such as, 'I am Marxist inclined, my ideal society is a classless society, so-and-so is my mentor, I was made use of by so-and-so,' to incriminate ourselves and other detainees." And then the next day, the signatories were rearrested. And eventually, they had to sign statutory declarations reaffirming their original statements to the Internal Security Department and were released. And the Home Minister actually stated that the ex-detainees were not seeking judicial or legal redress, but were acting as political propagandists out to discredit the government. Okay, so there's been a lot of doubts about the Marxist Conspiracy. This is by Chiam Si Tong. He says, "What is the case against them? What evidence do you have? Although the government has been saying, yes, we have evidence, otherwise we would not have arrested them. What evidence? You tell me. There is no evidence. The only evidence is their own confessions. That is all. Any court of law would throw out this kind of a confession." Former Attorney General Walter Woon said, "As far as I'm concerned, the government's case is still not proven. I would not say those fellows were red, not from the stuff they presented." I think a lot of people have this skepticism. And Minister Tharman Shanmugaratnam, who's in cabinet right now, said, "Although I had no access to state intelligence, from what I knew of them, most were social activists, but not out to subvert the system." So, in the light of all that's happened, some of the ex-detainees have actually released some books. You can look these up. Beyond the Blue Gate, Memoirs of a Political Detainee. There's this person called Tan Wah Piao, right in the middle, who was accused as being the mastermind of the Marxist Conspiracy. So, in spite of all that's happened, etc., even though they're not opening or declassifying the secret government files, but a lot of the ex-prisoners are telling their sides of the story. Okay, and these are also important sources for my research. So 5 plays from the Third Stage, they have published those, including the plays that I mentioned just now, O Singapore, Corabella, as well as Esperanza. And of course, a very useful resource on the far right is the story of PETA. Okay, so I want to ask, just throw out this question about a people's theatre. What actually happened in that moment? Very interesting moment, the 80s, when I think the monopoly of the People's Action Party in Singapore was threatened, and also it was during the period of martial law in the Philippines. What happened to this intra-regional transmission of ideas and techniques? Yeah. Contemporary Singapore English language theatre is associated with the middle class as well as bourgeois taste. Restrictions on the use of public spaces ensures that theatre is often performed in high rental venues with high ticket prices. Arts funding focus on professionalization shapes the discourse in a neoliberal direction. So in Singapore, when we watch plays, we always talk about production values. We also, have this kind of unconscious ranking of professional theatre and amateur theatre. We don't see the value of so-called amateur theatre. We don't see that it is a way in which people with limited resources nevertheless are able to create something meaningful. And then as a result, the English-speaking working class has been mostly rendered invisible in Singapore theatre. Thank you.
Thank you. So from Singapore, we go south to Indonesia, particularly in Java, in Central Java, to be precise, in Yogyakarta, where both of us live. So Muhammad Abe. Then let me read out. Abe, born in Central Java, Indonesia, now is based in Yogyakarta.
All right.
And
So
he works as an actor and researcher. He is the director of Indonesian Dramatic Reading Festival, IDRF, and in 2019 he was one of the curators of Asian Playwrights Meeting in Yogyakarta. Abe has been working in various fields of arts with projects which include researching and exhibiting archives of Bagong Kusudiarjo and Wisnuwardana. Both of them one passed away and one's choreographers from Jogja. And he also researched and writes for Pekan Teater Nasional or Indonesian National Theatre Festival in 2018, and he works as an observer for Asian Dramaturg Network in 2018 and curator for Indonesian play in Indonesia New Plays published by Aurora Metro Books, London in 2019. So please Abe.
Yeah, thank you Helly, and thank you Jejak-Tabi Exchange for inviting me here to do presentation. Selamat siang. Good afternoon. Okay, so I will start my presentation. That is, the title is The People's Theatre Movement Legacy and Empowerment in Indonesia, 1980s and 1990s. So for the beginning, I want to introduce one person that is very important in this period and also still important until now. I don't know, maybe you know. Anybody know? So this man known as the Smiling General. You look, he's smiling very white, very familiar. He is the second president of Indonesia that ruled from 1966 into 1998. He is quite famous in Indonesia and in the world, maybe until now. His first comment as a president is to banish the Communist Party, who resulted in around 500,000 people until 1 million people that accused to be communist killed in Indonesia. So you can see the military and the civil also doing the killings. This is very important because he's very strong man, and he's doing after 1966 all of the art, performing art, must censored by the military, and the military also arranged a lot of things to the art must be suitable with the national development program. So I will start my presentation from here. The connection between PETA and Indonesian theater was set by a Catholic priest, Father Rudy Hoffman, a Swiss Jesuit, who once worked in Indonesia. He is founder of Puskat, Pusat Kata Ketik or Center of Katathesis in Yogyakarta, Central Java. Puskat is founded in early 70s before he leaving for the country for a few years in mid 1970s to complete his communication degree in the US. It is believed that in US, Father Rudy has learned about liberation theology in Central and South America. After finishing his study, Father Rudy spent a year in Colombia in late 1970s where he became more interested in liberation theology and how it affected the concept of radical pedagogy by Paulo Freire and Augusto Boal's idea of theater of the oppressed. Father Rudy helped set the network of Puskat in Yogyakarta and PETA in Manila by sending theater practitioners and activists from Yogyakarta to attend PETA Forum Asian Theater Forum theater workshop. Although people around him admit that Father Rudy shared a great interest in liberation theology, it is not clear where he stood on the difference in the church about the use of liberation theology as political movement or class struggle. This will be also my question later. There are a number of artists and activists sent to PETA by Puskat from 1979 to mid 1980s. But some notable names are Fred Wibowo, MH Ainun Najib, Simon Hate, and Ariel Herianto. They were then cultural workers, social activists, and artists. Fred Wibowo was the leader of Theater Arena, a theater group affiliated with Puskat. MH Ainun Najib and Simon Hate were both playwright, cultural worker, and social activists. Ariel Herianto then was a student and social activist. They were, and some remain, prominent names in Yogyakarta and Indonesia. Some of them, like MH and Ariel, are still well known in Indonesia today. But at that time, except Fred Wibowo, they were young artists or students in their mid-20s or early 30s. The PETA Asia Theater Forum was a workshop that took place for more than a month, introducing methods for artists to work with people or community, especially those affected by social injustice, as to give them a chance for using their voice and to have their voice heard. Fred Wibowo of Theater Arena started to give workshops to students interested in this people theater method and applied this method for the first time in the community in Lewoleba, Lembata, East Nusa Tenggara in 1981 and 1983. The village where Father Rudy, Fred Wibowo, and the students lived was marred by conflict between lepers who were outcast by their own community. The workshop for the people and conflicted group ended with performance by them in front of the head of the village and local region. The performance ended the conflict and integrated the community in the village, resulting in Puskat team praised by the local region. This remains a success story that is told and passed until today, because after the workshop, Father Rudy and Puskat believe that the people's theater method could be applied anywhere. The presentation will be around the people's theater method flourished in Indonesia in 1970s to 1990s, and how it helped the next generation of theater workers and social activists. So we going back for the historical background. So Theater Arena that is affiliated with Puskat was founded in Yogyakarta in 1963 by Yaso Winarto, initially as part of the political Catholic Party. Back in the 1950s, 1960s, almost all of the groups in Indonesia were affiliated to political party. So there is three big party: Nationalist Party, the religion-based party, Islamic Party, Catholic Party, Christian Party, and the Communist Party. Fred Wibowo, trained as a classical Javanese dancer, joined Theater Arena in 1964 when he was only 17 years old. He remembers the tension between art communities in the arts back then, which was directly impacted by the conflict in politics. The young Fred remembers that the Communist and Nationalist Party tried to destroy groups that did not agree with their politics. At first, Theater Arena performed Western classic, Macbeth, Oedipus Rex, and later they do also modern Western play like George Bernard Shaw, and Sartre. In the same period, the cultural wing of PKI, or Indonesia Communist Party, Lekra, is a lembaga kebudayaan rakyat, in English, Institution of People's Culture, was one of the most important institutions. Lekra promoted program for the artists to go to the village and to work together with the locals. The program was named Turba. Turba is in bahasa Indonesia turun ke bawah. It means going down with go to the people. The program aimed to use the art as a means for class struggle. There are not much archives on the performing art done by Lekra, but there are enough evidence that Lekra worked a lot with traditional art form, which were more popular and easy to use to communicate with the peoples than the modern form. So traditional form is using local language, not bahasa Indonesia, which is our national language. Although Lekra believed in the art as tool for class struggle, one of the frequent issue highlighted in the performance was supporting the land reform program. The performance mostly used traditional art forms such as ketoprak or ludruk. They are Javanese traditional drama in local vernacular, and mostly the plays show the clash between the peasants and the landlord. PKI and Lekra ended in 1966 when the first President Sukarno was replaced by Lieutenant General Suharto, whose first command was to disband PKI and all their affiliates, either killing or jailing them without trials. This culminated in 1965 massacre of anybody accused as communist and Marxist all over Indonesia. In 1970, Puskat was established, and a year later, Puskat invited Theater Arena to join them. At the time, Theater Arena followed the trends in the period, which was adapting Western play into local context. This trend was set by W.S. Rendra, a prominent modern theater figure in Indonesia from 1960s to 1980s. Around the same time, Puskat also gathered social activists and cultural workers to discuss the current political situation in Indonesia. Suharto and New Order government brought a different approach to the arts and life in Indonesia in general. After stabilizing the political situation post 1965 massacre, Suharto went on with the economic development program by welcoming foreign investment in oil and automotive business, which boosts Indonesian economy, especially for the urban society. On the other side, Suharto policies created social injustice and disadvantage for rural peoples. Suharto also tended to create controversial monumental projects that raised criticism from the students and social activists, resulted in two big demonstrations in 1974 in Jakarta and 1978 in universities in Bandung and Yogyakarta. Both demonstrations were faced by military power and resulted in the presidential decree that political activism were banned in the campus. The government also introduced stricter laws for the arts. Theater director and poet W.S. Rendra, in peak of his popularity, was arrested in Jakarta in 1978 because his poem criticizing the New Order. He and his theater group were banned to perform until 1986. After being banned to perform, Rendra moved from Yogyakarta to the outskirts of Jakarta. So some members of his theater company start to build their own groups in Yogyakarta. Most notably was Theater Dynasty, founded by Fajar Suharno. In Theater Dynasty, Fajar Suharno worked with the M. Haino Najib, who is also sent to PETA workshop, and Simon Hate. Theater Dynasty mostly performed modern plays written by M. Haino Najib that integrated elements of traditional theater. The performance of Theater Dynasty often criticized the government policy using metaphors of situation between people and the local district government in the village. The New Order unpopular approach for the arts and artists, also for the people who become victim of his development project, aligned the artists and social activists to fight against it. Most of the modern artists took the position to be against New Order. In 1979, Remy Riken of PETA visited Yogyakarta and invited Fred Wibowo, MH Ainun Najib, and Simon Hate to participate in PETA Asia Theater Forum workshop for 6 weeks in Manila. Fred Wibowo saw the workshop as very exciting and convinced to build theater around similar orientation. As he said, we had been trying to think for a while about how to conduct cultural action for social change. But when we finally saw its power right on our own doorstep, naturally we were very enthusiastic. Puskat also tried this method to work with the villagers around Yogyakarta. Since the New Order policy was more focused in developing industry, less attention given to the villagers and farming. Because of the oil price boom in the 1970s, Indonesia enjoyed boost in capital economic, creating wide economic disparity between urban and village community. But in the 1980s, the oil price was slowly back to normal. And the state oil industry, Pertamina, was also hit by corruption scandal, slowing down the economic development. The New Order then started to develop farming and tourism industry. The Green Revolution was officially endorsed by the government in 1984. The Green Revolution also connected Indonesia and Philippines. This program affected the peasants and farmers in the village because it's top-down policy, forcing farmers to use government seeds and pesticides. The People's Theater Workshop in 1981 attracted 150 participants, mostly students. The workshop was conducted in Parangtritis Beach in rural areas south of Yogyakarta, just when the area was being developed to be a tourist destination. During the workshop, the participants conducted research by living together with the villagers in surrounding area to collect the villager stories. Theater Arena, Father Rudy, set the dialogue with the local peoples and the students to analyze the situation in the village, the conclusion being the condition is a result of development from above, which will be the main analysis frame for Theater Arena. The workshop in Parangtritis Beach resulted in performance by 3 groups of the participants, each performing a story they created from the surroundings. The enthusiasm of the locals when they saw their stories or their problems talked on the stage, and also how the students felt energized when the workshop made by Fred Wibowo energized by the workshop made Fred Wibowo see the workshop as a great success. But from the workshop, Fred himself had a question. The participants are going back to the city when the workshop is over. Well, there is a need for direct involvement to create social movement. Theater Arena followed the workshop with another project in Tanen Pakem, a village in the slope of Mount Merapi between Yogyakarta and Central Java province. The village is impoverished village, so the workshop is to help the village to overcome its problem. In the first phase of the project, Theater Arena noticed some problem of the village. 1. The village had inadequate irrigation system. 2nd, poverty. And the 3rd, the children in the village having difficulties in school. In the next phase, Theater Arena members proposed that they should work with the villagers to solve their problem. Theater Arena helped the local residents to map their problems, so the local resident came to a decision to solve each of their community problems. From this process, the local residents conclude that the main factor of their situation was the neglect of the village chief and how the local government liaison official influenced in the determining where the government development money was channeled. The villagers put on two play addressing the situation. Both are play based on ketoprak format, a traditional theater form. This is in 1984. Oh yeah, I just forgot. Nah, this is ketoprak. Fred Wibowo and Theater Arena facilitators, concerned about the village chief would stop the project, to the previous conclusion that he was the main factor that caused poor condition of the village, and the play intended to criticize his policy. Instead, the chief, who was present for two performances, admitting that the plays made him more aware of the existing problems, and he requested that similar workshop to be held in other villages under his jurisdiction. This was seen as achievement for Theater Arena, that the whole process result in a government official acknowledge the problem in his area, and also he admit that he was part of the problem. The project became the prototype of Theater Arena work, functioning as alternative for top-down bureaucratic centralist approach. Theater Arena continued to work with Tanan Pakem village and its surrounding. The local residents, inspired by the success of the performance, went on to solve their problems in various ways, using available resources and service. Throughout the process, the villagers continue to make all the decisions themselves. Theater Arena and Fred Wibowo were aware that theater is part of urban middle class lifestyle, but they already moved away from this idea of theater as entertainment. They believe theater took part in educating the society and as a means for critical thinking. Since 1979, Theater Arena was never heard of producing a stage performance that is not created together with the community where the performance will take place. However, Theater Arena got invited to a theater festival held in Yogyakarta Cultural Center in 1986. The festival took place in the Cultural Center located in the University of Gadjah Mada, Yogyakarta. It's in the middle of the town. Having never worked with urban society, Theater Arena decided to create a stage performance based on the practice they have done for a few years, the People's Theater Method, to reflect on the society problem they are facing now and to share with the urban audience. The play was written by Fred Wibowo. The title is Tumbal, or in English, Victim, which he also directed together with Bambang Paningron, a young Theater Arena member. Michael Boden, a scholar on Indonesia theater, found similarity on the play to Bertolt Brecht, Die Mutter. Although Theater Arena production drew a lot from Javanese traditional theater style, in the interview for this presentation, Bambang Paningron said that Tumbal was actually based on one of Augusto Boal invisible theaters, which Father Rudy Hoffman had brought and discussed with Theater Arena members on developing their own People's Theater Method. Tumbal, or Victim, tells a story of a young man in a village who is forced to migrate to the city to find work. On the journey to the city, an old bridge collapses when he is crossing it, tossing him into the river. The villagers try to save him, but every effort is thwarted by lack of necessary facilities. For instance, the only car in the village doesn't have a light. Due to the collapsing bridge, they must take detour through the muddy road. The young man dies when he finally arrives in the hospital a day later. The play opens up with a group of angry peasants carrying the dead body of the young man. The peasant then stops a student and asks him to be a judge in a trial to determine who's responsible of the death of the youth. The student refuses because he feels he doesn't have sufficient capacity, but the peasant arts, and this resulted in lively courtroom dialogue, reminding that in the democratic country, the highest authority is its people, and here we are the people. In short,
The performance concludes when the patients realize that it's not on any individual's fault that creates the lack of facilities, infrastructure, and opportunities in the village, but the logic and structure of the entire social system that is to blame. Tumbal, or victim, is an offer to Yogyakarta artistic community as alternative format of theater performance. During the course of performance, the actors on stage ask the audience to respond to what happens on the stage. The performance also mentioned that the audience as the judge, and by doing so, theater is a dramaturgical intention to turn the audience into spectator. The truth is, in many traditional performances, the interactive communication between audience and actors on stage is very common. But in the modern urban theater, because of the stage and structure that separate actors to the audience, such interactivity is rare. In People's Theater method, or in Brechtian on Boal's theater, they also to break the barrier between theater and its audience, to find agreement or disagreement together on the current issues. Theater maker Bambang Paningron still recounts that in discussion after the performance, many Yogyakarta artists accuse him in theater arena of using Marxist point of view, so similar with Singapore also. They also said that the performance has smell of lekra, which is from Communist Party in 1960s. Referring to the band communist leaning cultural organization in 50s and 60s. But unlike in other area, this accusation never been a big issue in Yogyakarta, different with Singapore. There is three reasons for this. First, there is a trend in 1980s and 1990s in Indonesia to use art as space to voicing disagreement to government policy as a reaction to New Order restriction. Theater arena offer a method that can be used in art or in social activism. This is also the case of Boal and his Invisible Theater, Forum Theater, and Legislative Theater. Secondly, theater arena use traditional theater format, which allows satirical jokes or political jokes to be included without offending anybody. In the 80s, there was a lot of case when theater performance was banned because its political content, but it's never been any case for traditional performing arts to be banned, since most of the performance were not scripted and was never seen as a threat to the military and the government. And the last reason is theater arena was affiliated with Puskat, which was owned by the Catholic Church. Similar with Theater Arena and Puskat, MH Aino Najib and Simon Hate, the other two who joined the 1979 PETA workshop, were working together in Theater Dynasty. They developed People's Theater method in Theater Dynasty performance by writing plays based on their interaction with common people. There was similar issue of development offered by Theater Dynasty performance. However, different from Theater Arena, who was affiliated with an established institution and had channel to various networks in Indonesia and foreign countries, Theater Dynasty was a theater group who worked by themselves. MH Aino Najib, who was then already popular among Indonesian youth Muslim community in 1980s, often toured in rural cities of Java, where he performed poetry reading and gave speech in front of thousands of people, where he urged the Muslim society to raise consciousness on the current political and cultural issues surrounding them. Nah, this is him with his followers. That is many. 5 minutes more. Okay. So yeah, maybe I will cut to People's Theater in Indonesia reached its peak between 1987 to mid-90s. This is in large part because there was cooperation between NGOs with its village empowerment program. Puskat started to train NGOs workers and facilitators in People's Theater method since 1987, giving Puskat a chance to enter into larger NGOs network. Simon Hate together with Joko Kanto and Agus Istianto from Teater Dinasti formed Kelompok Teater Rakyat Indonesia. The group worked with NGOs on programs. By this time, the tools used for the People's Theater was not only for the stage, but what NGO field workers called at the time media murah or affordable media, consisting of community radio, local newspaper, and People's Theater. Simon Hate even started using cheap camera on his work with youths in village. The peak of People's Theater method was when Theater Arena and other activists convinced Bappenas, National Board of Development Planning, to use People's Theater method as component on integrated pest management field school all over Indonesia from 1989 to 1991. The program was undertaken by Bappenas in conjunction with FAO to reduce the use of the pesticide by the farmers. The program in large part was a result of Green Revolution program that was promoted by Indonesian government in early 1984. And maybe a bit on the second generation. The second generation is from 90s, which actually they are coming from the Puskat, and they start to work not only with the villagers but also with the urban society. Like I mentioned, here is Institut Teater Rakyat Indonesia, who they are Catholic students who are interested in theater and social activism, and they are believed that they're still doing the workshop until today, and what they believe is to adapt the method so everybody can do the People's Theater project, not only in the village or urban society, but they also start to work also with people with disability, and also work with the villagers that how to say, still less educated than the others. And for the closing, the method is still done until today. Here is some pictures. This is for workers theater in Jakarta and Tangerang, who also Helly involved in some of the project. This is from Teater Buruh Indonesia, Indonesian Workers Theater, and this one from Teater Abu, which is very famous. The actors are workers in the factory in Jakarta, mostly women, and yeah, this is also supported by NGO funding. And this is the last one, is the People Theater workshop that I attend for this research 2 weeks ago in Puskat. So Puskat still doing the workshop, but it's now limited only for the students, especially for the students of pedagogy Catholic teacher. And they do 1 week workshop to introduce People's Theater for the department that ended with a performance. This performance mostly about the poor urban community in Yogyakarta. Yeah, this is the story. One of the group is about the buruh gendong. How to say that in English? Buruh gendong is difficult. Yeah, about workers in the traditional market in Yogyakarta. Mostly women, old women that is usually they have low wage. But it's different with in the 1980s and 1990s because it's more how to say, limited, exclusive, only for the department. They don't do it outside anymore. And also, I think different the political and cultural situation in Indonesia is now different with the 80s or 90s, where the artists, social activists, cultural worker are being in one side against the new order government, because the society now in Indonesia and maybe also in other world is more divided, more to be divided to many groups. As you see, I want to here is this is the same guy with my first slide. So this is in Japanese, and it said, "How are you? It's better on my period." So there is some people in Indonesia who believe that it's better in his period, although that he's quite a dictator and a lot of victim in Indonesia at the time and in his reign. So he also still popular now in Indonesia, but also as you see, there are some activists who still doing this. This is a poster to reject the new airport in Yogyakarta. That is, yeah, it's being built and it's already done in Yogyakarta. So what I want to say for the ending is, yeah, People's Theater Method had big influence on the theater scene and cultural scene in Indonesia in 1980s and 1990s, and the produce from that generation is still working until now. But right now, yeah, the work is more limited, more exclusive, not as big and not as energized like that period. That's my conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Abe. Also, and thank you for your passion to really go through these two different contexts. Yeah, I mean, to refresh, I would like Alfian to recap, like to reflect on the Singapore theater scene now. Are there any theater groups in Singapore and communities who even remotely still adapt this, still adapts this community, yeah, and part of the continue the lineage?
Yeah. So in Singapore right now, there is at least one company which is called Drama Box, and they do what can be described as community theatre. They have their roots from another theatre company which is called The Necessary Stage. The Necessary Stage, some of its members used to attend workshops from the third stage. So if you want to trace something like that, you can see like some kind of faint line of transmission between PETA and then third stage, The Necessary Stage, and then Drama Box. Drama Box is interesting because they do these contestations over public space in Singapore. So in Singapore, for example, you cannot perform in any public area without a permit, but you can do performances indoors, right? So what Drama Box does is that they have this thing called an inflatable theater, called Goli. So this theater, they take around, and then suddenly in the middle of an open field, they will inflate this theater, which suddenly becomes an indoor space. So because of this kind of ambiguity over what is this? It's outdoor, yet at the same time it's got these inflatable walls that therefore keeps it enclosed. Is this therefore indoor? So a lot of interesting negotiations with authorities about public space and notions of the public.
Yeah, only to recap, like there is tangent lines of this historical, political history. For example, like in 1980s, it's the peak. Singapore was only like 15 years old, but it's the monopoly, the one-party system has been installed. But then again, challenged in 1984 by
opposition
the
party.
opposition parties entering the parliament. But in Indonesia, we kind of like so-called enjoyed the economic boom because of the oil. But then again, towards the end, Suharto start giving business licenses to his kids, his sons and daughters. So that's the start, marking his, nepotism level of corruption. And then, so in early 90s, in Indonesia, that's also emerged I think the regime started cracking because I think I remember 1991, the East Timor, I mean Indonesia, shamefully annexed East Timor, and then the first riot start, because at that time it's very hard to get some news from Jakarta. So you can see this is also affected and resonated the activism in theater in the region in the 90s. Then maybe we can also reflect of what's going on in the Philippines during that time. So now maybe I just simply open a forum for those of you who like to know more, and from these two resource person, maybe to clarify and then to post any questions and responses. Anyone? There from that side? Please simply briefly state your name and
Good morning, everyone. So I am Marshall Cabe from Capiz National High School, a student from Humanities and Social Sciences strand. So since Philippine Educational Theater Association, or PETA, is already 50 years existing in the field of artistry, my question is, how do educators manage to feature the different facets of Filipino cultures despite of diversity among people? Thank you. So my question is addressed to any one of you.
Sorry, could you repeat that a little?
Okay po.
Yeah.
Okay.
Could you
So,
repeat?
Since PETA is
50 years.
already 50 years existing in the field of artistry, how do educators manage to feature different facets of Philippine culture despite of diversity among people? Thank you.
I feel that that's more a question about PETA history as well as its identity. So I'm wondering whether Maribel Lagarda, who is in the audience, might want to respond to that. Yeah. Would you like to, Maribel? I don't mean to put you on a spot, but
Oh my God. I don't know how to answer. No, I mean, yes, you're right. PETA is a very old company, and we've really been through. I think it's so interesting to listen to this historicizing of the experience in a particular period, because it's in many ways, alam nyo yung same but different. And I think yung 50 plus years that PETA has existed has actually given us an opportunity to really journey through different types of playmaking, theater making, no? Whether it was intensely political in the 1980s, because given yung condition, di ba? I think since yesterday till today, hindi ko alam kung ano na nagre-resonate with the young millennials while you're listening to this. I'm actually very curious about your reflection habang while you're listening to this experiences of political theater in the 1980s, and then looking at yourself now as millennials or Zs in this generation. It's interesting for me sana that connection can be made, because I think that's the most important reflection that you should take out from this, diba? Yung diversity. We in PETA, we have just been constantly trying to survive or continue the journey of the art making that we believe is important. And I think taking from the sharing, especially during the time the Asian Theater Forum, I think PETA kasi really sees theater as a tool that can contribute to social change. And I think yung belief na yon has been tested through the years. It has practiced theater since its founding in 1967. So nag-iba-iba yun, no? It was different in 67, like the same with Singapore. We were founded in the years when English was more important. When theater was only in mostly academic, then we would make plays purely lang in English, di ba? So yun yung milieu, kung ganun, yung Singapore, ganun rin sila, no? So there's something shared within the region as an experience wherein theater of our own language was mas mababa yung tingin. So therefore, that's where PETA started, meaning we had to make plays that use the national language. And then later on, we saw that also as being supportive to the regions when we went out to work with the regions is to create plays using the language, di ba? Whether it's Bisaya, Hiligaynon, Ilocano, whatever. Which, parang ganon, what they were talking about. And yun yung siguro yung mga theories, or mga beliefs and principles of PETA when we say that theater has a function for social change. And at the same time, it also believes that theater cannot exist on its own. So therefore, this need to connect. And like today's topic, di ba, parang kumbaga, from us, from PETA, from just being Metro Manila, it really went out and connected to the regions, and that's why we found ourselves in Panay, in the north, in Mindanao. Kasi naniniwala talagang PETA truly believes that, you cannot exist on your own. You have to really create and replicate and create a network. And eventually, it went out of its borders. That's why we have Asian Theater Forum, no? Not only to share because, to ground and to share aesthetics, because we want to root through our own practices and Asian practices. But also, we see this network that we need to build to also be strong. Diba? So yun yung mga parang principles niya. It's creating performances. It's also teaching. And I think, let's say, I was with Al when we went to Singapore. So this is like, parang nahi-hit back memory ako. So, bumabata ako. Pumapayat ako. Hindi, parang it's like walking down memory lane. Anyway, but I remember when we were there, since we truly wanted to teach and share a particular methodology or process of playmaking. And it was that reason. Ngayon, because PETA also believes that theater should be a lens to look at society and to look at how it can contribute to social change, it then becomes something what's the word I want to use? Something radical at a time when there is suppression and censorship. Diba? And I think sana yun yung context na pwede natin, yung mga kabataan ngayon, parang hindi kayo na parang, what the? Hindi. I mean, kasi it could be a what the moment eh. But really, it's really, we're asking ourselves, can theater have or perform or function not only as entertainment, but as also something that contributes to change, to education, to the betterment of yung yesterday when they said that parang dun sa political theater or sa mga indigenous, nagturo ng magbasa muna bago mag-appreciate. That whole thing diba, it's connected to education. So ang teatro, hindi lang pang personal enjoyment. Ang teatro ay something na talagang pwedeng not only to the personal, but also to the community and later on to the world. So parang circles yan, diba yung ganon. So these are some of the beliefs that we've had since its founding years, and we are trying to continue. Of course, nag-change ang path ng PETA. Siguro can I just also talk a little bit about, because I think it's also interesting because our path also changed nung nag-decide kami magkaroon ng sarili naming teatro sa Maynila. No? I think that also changed yung mga ginagawa namin. I think other people think that there's no outflow, but that's not true. Up to now, yung mga work namin, connected pa rin dun sa mga iba't ibang klaseng. But now we call it advocacies. You may say for a cause, ang tawag namin dun is advocacy theater. Meaning, gumagawa kami ng plays tungkol sa kababaihan, environment, positive discipline, disaster rehab. So these are all iba't ibang you say causes, we call it advocacy. Pero it's really basically, andun pa rin yung the principle that theater is not only an artistic tool for personal development, but it is also something we can use to really contribute to change and betterment of society. And kumbaga, sabi ko nga kay Bong, our problems, hindi naman nababawasan ang problema ng tao, di ba? Whether it's economic, cultural, political, but how we deal with it. And one of the ways we believe we would like to share is how we deal with it using art and theater and culture as a method. Yung ganun. Sobra bang haba answer ko? Sorry, but yon. Anyway, yon. Thank you.
Hi. I think it's good afternoon. I'd like to, if okay with you, may I ask you, you're a student, right? So I just would like to clarify, if your question is, how would you train the teachers from the PETA? How are they training the teachers? So I think I'll get back also to the question is, why is it important for the PETA people to train the teachers for what purpose? So I think this is the connection. Okay, by the way, I'm Ninette Delgado, and I am a product of the third stage, actually, of the PETA. Okay, and siguro akong lola dito sa grupo. But, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. This is something very personal with me. For the millennials, might be na... Okay, I'll talk in Tagalog first. Siguro ang layo para sa inyo na ano to mang nangyayari na to, it's so far away from your reality, but I just want you to know, nangyari to. We're a part of that. We're living witness to what happened. And because of that, we're still here. I don't know if I have other kabatch. May mga lola pa ba nandyan? But I just want you to know that out of that, we are producing a new generation also who would advocate for the cause of the transformation of society. Theater and education as a common goal, which is a transformation of society. So in answer to that question, how do we train? Yes, we need to train the teachers in order to educate the young people here that there is a need for us to go back to reality and not just to rely on the social media to tell us. Because whoever tells the story, the social media, would control the culture. And that is very sad. So anyway, just to give you a background, I am a school director of Progressive Inclusive School. And why I'm so emotional right now, because I feel that hindi ako nag-iisa. You're here, and I hope this is the start of reviving. So we have also done some children theater, and we are still doing it now. So we hope we can continue doing it. And this time, hindi na kami nag-iisa. Andiyan na kayo.
Okay, in connection sa sagot ni ma'am, and in response to the question, how to train teachers, I am also a product of one of the workshops of PETA. Way back, late 1990s. I started theater 2004. I was in college. I've been in theater for like 13, 14 years already, and I'm a teacher. And the question is how to train the teachers. How to connect, kasi ang layo ang yung disparity from the ng PETA at sa mga millennials ngayon. Siguro, we have to understand what is Philippine theater. Kasi iba yung Philippine theater sa understanding natin on the theater from the Westerns. Why we have, in our discussions since yesterday, it always rooted to politics. Because theater existed in the country because of politics, because Filipino, during the time of the Spaniards, they use it as a form of uprising. And we should understand that. And even right now to the millennials, okay, still, andun pa din yung, it's a matter of how we understand. And let's go back to what is the responsibility of theater to the society, especially sa mga bagong generation. And to the teachers also, we have the notion that theater is for career, stardom, and fame. Let's go back to what is the purpose of the theater. That would be all.
Thank you, MJ. So maybe it's maybe one more questions to. I mean, I'm kind of overwhelmed, of course.
Hello,
So
good
I'm
noon.
still processing.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Good noon, everyone. My name is Lira Sheena Zarce. I am a senior high school faculty member of Philomar Christian University. I am a nurse by profession, but because my love for theater has blossomed through the years, so I took up classes in PETA from 2013 until 2018. So my question for our speakers are just very simple. Now that you have senior high school students who are here listening to your speech, what will you advise them to experience theater? Now, with all the oppression, with all the injustice that we have been listening to or knowing, what can you advise them in a way? Because as a teacher, because my love for theater has blossomed, I separated my medical field just to be a teacher. So in a way, it's part of my lifestyle. Now for the new generations, what can you advise them? Because some of them are from UM, I guess some of them are in a medical field, but loves theater. So what can you advise them?
Okay. Difficult question. Very difficult question, but from my experience in theater or with the People's Theater Method that I have a chance to do together with my colleagues in Jejak-Tabi in 2018, there is one principle that is important, that it must be simple. It can be done by everybody. If somebody cannot do it, then it's not People's Theater, if it related to People's Theater. So it must be as simple as it can be. And the second thing is to express ourselves. I think that is one thing that generation right now, the millennials or generation Z, I think the one thing that different is they tend to express themselves in social media. I mean, I don't know what they use right now, Instagram or no, Seni New, but I think you will have different pleasure if you can express yourself in front of the stage, in front of the people, and if you can share your stories or you can deliver somebody else's stories, it will be, I mean, it's have different enjoyment or pleasure than you just post photos in Instagram or Twitter or something else. That's, enjoy as much as you can and express yourself as much as you can.
Thank you. So I definitely agree with Abe. I also do think a lot of these kinds of people theatre, so something like forum theatre is something that demands your participation, right? So it is a kind of a form of democratic participation. And the thing about democracy is that if you're just going to be passive bystanders, if you're not going to actively be involved, democracy dies. Democracy really, really depends on you expressing yourselves and making your voice heard and knowing that your voice is important, right? So don't just sit back and, oh, let other people get involved, I'll just watch from the side. This kind of watching from the side is actually very dangerous in societies where democracy is under threat. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we are squeezed by time, but I think there is one question. We can still accommodate one question.
Hello, good morning. My name is Mark Paulo Alvarez from Capiz National High School under the stand of Humanities and Social Science. So my question is, what is the difference of Asian theater from the Western theater?
Big question.
I don't think we have time to go into that. I think, wow, this is a very complex question, but thank you anyway for asking that. Wow, I think we need to look at the different histories of Western as well as Asian theatre. We need to look at, let's say, how Western dramaturgy has developed where there's a lot of focus on text, for example, and plot and drama, whereas with Asian theatre, sometimes in Europe, they've inspired by Asian theatres, bragged by Chinese opera, for example, are taught by Balinese theatre, because they see that Asian theatre is theatrical, right? It's not just based on the text itself, it's based on the performance, on the use of the space, which is not just proscenium theatre. If you see a lot of Asian traditional theatres, they take place in like public spaces where it's in the round, right? And it's a communal, different from like sitting very quietly in a Western theater, watching a play and being very well behaved. A lot of Asian theater is like you can come in and out, you can eat, you can communicate, you can say things to the actors. So I think maybe these are some of the differences between folk and traditional Asian theater, and a very kind of a bit more elite and codified form of Western theater. Yeah, but thank you for that. I think we are still searching, and I think a lot of us within the region, with PETA and Third Stage, I think we are all really trying to learn from each other, because this question is also a decolonial question, right? How do we go back to the roots of who we are, what our theater is, because so much is influenced by Western theater. So I think it's that kind of like search or recovery of our particular pre-colonial identities. Yeah, thank you.
I think it's all in Alfian answer. But yeah, one thing, I don't know, Western theater, Asian theater, but I don't know if we have, I want to talk about that. I mean, Indonesian theater, Japanese theater, I don't know if it's Asian or not, but what I know in Indonesia is if you do it on the stage, on an auditorium or in a cultural center, it usually have this proscenium format of stage. It's very different if I see the performance in my village outside of the stage, because it's more like fluid, flexible. It's not scripted. The actors are improvised, and the audience can say something to the actor, even stop the performance. Or no, the story is not like that. The story better can be like this. It can be like that. It's more something that is, I feel, very different. Because if you are in the stage, you must sit and watch the performance until the end. And then, I don't know, I'm bored, or I like the performance, but in what we say, traditional performance we have. That why we call it traditional actually. It can be contemporary. Yeah, it's something that more fluid. The border are more blur, and something that we can, yeah. I mean, in and out. Yeah. So the audience can be the actors. It's more democratic, in a sense. In a sense.
They are looking for identity because my humanities students are more of the local identity rather than that of colonial identity that we all in the most Asian countries experience. So they're looking for the difference between the identity of the Asian theater
And the
vis-a-vis that of the European or Western theater.
Well, if I answer that question, maybe should start with the local values of performing art or local performing art you have. Then you can start from there, and then, I mean, Asia is very big. I don't know, India, Japan, Chinese, Indonesia. But one thing that I learned is that fluidity and the democratic sense of traditional theater, local.
The Generation Z is more exposed to that of the Western theater compared to that of the Asian theater. And so this is also going to be a learning experience for us teachers in humanities so that we will be able to nurture and start with the cultural identity of Asian theater as well.
I personally feel that we are living in a historical moment where there's been so much mixing and mutual influencing that sometimes it's difficult to say what is a pure kind of Asian theater. And even if we see those things, they become very museum pieces. I think what's important is to see theater that's still very living and alive and responsive to the needs of the community. I think that's more important rather than to say, oh, this is Western and we should reject it, or this is Asian and we should embrace it. I think, yeah, we live in a time when there's been so much flux already. Yeah.
By then, yeah, I think. Okay, thank you so much for your generous questions and responses, and your patience of listening all this complex history. I hope to see you, most of you, tonight at the performance, and we still have two sessions this afternoon. I hope you come back as well. Yeah, we meet again at 1:30.